Scott Sumi is a Canadian artist raised in Vancouver, BC, currently working out of his studio in East Vancouver. Since attending Emily Carr in 2006, Sumi has been working as a graphic artist and painter. Starting in the graffiti subculture, he has ventured through art, design, and installation painting. Sumi has been commissioned to work with the collaborators such as HCMA Architecture, the City of Vancouver, and the Vancouver Parks Board. Sumi has completed a large-scale public art project with the City of Vancouver and tech company Hootsuite, painting a full 3-story building for the Vancouver Mural Festival in 2016. In 2017, with the Vancouver Parks Board, Sumi also completed a public art piece on the surface of the basketball court in Mount Pleasant Park. Sumi has also exhibited his work internationally in New York, San Francisco, Miami, and Cape Town, South Africa. Recent exhibitions include Bone Broth Maybury Fine Art in Toronto, Sleeping Arrangements, AAF NYC, Homework at the Komodo Gallery in Vancouver in 2018. So welcome, Scott Sumi.
Thank you. That was a great intro.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being here, and we're super excited to talk to you.
Cool. I'm happy to be here. Thank you for the opportunity.
So the first question I always ask people is I would love you to describe your artwork and think about how the artwork that you're making right now kind of places in a cultural context, or how you're looking at your artwork. What kind of themes and content do you explore, and maybe describe a little bit of the evolution of your art practice.
Best place to start is sort of my upbringing, I guess. So in terms of giving some context around some of the work that I create now, I grew up in East Vancouver here. My studio is actually pretty close to the neighborhood that I grew up now, which has been, I only recently moved here 2 years ago, so it's been kind of a nice recharge for me to be back in sort of same neighborhood, similar neighborhood I grew up in. But I'm the first artist in my family. My dad works in the print industry here in Vancouver. So he's been, I've always sort of been around graphic design growing up. And my mom, she works as a social worker now, but when I was growing up, she had many different jobs. But she was also a baker at one point. She ran a bakery in Kitsilano.
Cool. Really?
Yes. Yeah. So, my parents were kind of, from running a small business to graphic design, there was always sort of like creativity around. It just didn't really manifest for me until much later in my life. So when I was growing up, I primarily played sports like soccer and, was always outside running around. And that's when I got into skateboarding. And, through skateboarding, there was kind of a creativity involved with sports. So that's kind of how I transitioned into the art. Skateboarding was just such a great cultural and creative gateway for me to, discover graffiti art and other subcultural things. And that's kind of what led me to eventually narrowing in and focusing on abstract painting. So to answer your original question, the work I do now, I primarily paint abstract, and my work sort of focuses on various themes around color. I would say color primarily, relationships, ideas around like balance, rhythm, harmony, scale and texture. Those are all things that are very important to my work, and things that I continue to explore in kind of in a way to, I sort of try to tell story through those channels. But yeah, those are the things I think are like pillars to painting in some way, whether it's abstract or representational. But I'm constantly trying to get to the root of those ideas with my work.
When I've been looking at your more recent work, especially, it kind of looks like a little code or cipher or sort of hieroglyphics that are sort of trying to get me to like figure out what it is that you're trying to tell me, or so it's kind of like an alphabet that you've created.
That's interesting.
I do believe that with great great abstract painting, you are kind of distilling down ideas to their very essence. And so I think it's actually really challenging to do that. And you have to have a very, masterful understanding of color and form to be able to do that. And it's deceptively simple looking.
I agree 100%. I feel I'm always kind of trying to challenge myself to tell more thoughtful stories with my work, all while at the same time not trying to fully spell out what it is I'm painting or what it is I'm exploring. I still want the viewer to bring their own experiences to the table when they're looking at my work, and they might see something that I'm not seeing. I definitely do see it as both as a therapeutic practice as well. It's physical, and I think there's something nice about looking at something that just deals with the materiality of paint, or really looking at solid color. It kind of quiets the rest of the world around you. So
I know that you were a graffiti artist for a while. How influential to your development as an artist now was that culture for you?
I would say hugely. I constantly feel like indebted to my upbringing, and I don't think I would really change it for a different experience per se.
So after that, for you, then came what?
Graffiti really opened up my. I basically got obsessed with it. Like you would mountain biking or any other. I consider it kind of a sport in a way, because it's definitely has its sort of rules and ebb and flows and stuff. But it really, I think, when I look back, what I'm most thankful for and excited about when I reflect back on it is how much opportunity it gave me early on in my career, whether that was traveling and meeting people. So I traveled to many different cities and met with many different graffiti artists, and would paint walls with them, or it was sort of like a form of tourism through that medium that really
that's so cool.
allowed me to see the world in a completely different way. And a really magical sort of time to kind of explore art through traveling and through just real world experience.
So you own and run an art store in East Vancouver called Layout. I'd like you to tell me a little bit about that, but I've been to your store, but what are your favorite materials at your store right now? And tell us about your store.
Cool. I'd love to. So I am one of three partners in the art store. I started selling paint through my involvement with graffiti writers and through meeting some suppliers down in Miami when I traveled down there. And that's when I started to bring this one product called Montana Colors up from into Vancouver, because it was kind of like hard to get out here. Yeah. And so the store really just started with me buying larger amounts of paint for my own use, and then also selling it to friends just out of the corner of my studio space. This is sort of back in like 2011. I partnered up with two guys that I knew through the art scene in Vancouver, and they just kind of we just kind of really got along. They're good friends of mine. So the store has kind of grown very organically. We never had ambitions to make it a business. It just sort of slowly happened on its own, and now it's just starting to get really exciting, where we're curating different products And since my studio is in the back half of the space behind the store, we are an artist run art store, and we don't have like a huge space, so we have fewer products, and through that we're able to really speak to each one because we're carefully curating the type of pens or pencils or acrylics that we're bringing in. We just want to make sure that we can give people that one-on-one service, and really speak to the products from experience, or can vouch for their quality.
I mean, a huge part of being an artist is knowing so well your materials. And so it's like the best, it's really the best, Scott. Like you've got like that it's been organic for you, that it's just kind of coming around, and the store is cool. It's the only thing about your store is like it's actually very mysterious because there's no big sign outside. So that's like, it's like, it just looks like a warehouse in a way. So with this business and how your kind of practice has grown, maybe describe your relationship to the commercial world of art, and how has becoming an owner of an art supply business helped you in becoming a successful artist? Or did it even?
Yeah. I think I learned a lot through like some of my before I was like really heavily doing fine art and showing in galleries and doing exhibitions. I was working freelance for quite a while. So out of art school, I started working freelance as a graphic designer, muralist, kind of you name it. I was just like picking up any work that I could possibly do. And
but in art.
So, trying to navigate and kind of figure out what I liked through saying yes to a lot of projects, essentially. So, that came with like sign painting, sometimes live painting events. There's a lot of
good for you.
I mean, there's a lot of
terrible to me.
There was a lot of cringy jobs that I said yes to, but just I had to do it.
Well, good for you.
Yeah.
It just scares the shit out of me, the live painting thing.
Yeah, it all had a place in kind of informing my practice now, and kind of leading me to like figuring out what I wanted to say yes to and what I wanted to say no to.
Yeah, that's an important step.
Earlier on, I felt like it was always like there was like two parts of me, like the guy that wanted to have an art practice and the guy that wanted to run a store, and they were always kind of at odds with one another because I could only invest so much time to like growing the store in the way that it wanted to grow, and also like realizing that I might not be able to ever like pull a salary from this business. It's just like just wanting to invest in it a fair bit, but also knowing that it was taking away from my time doing art. But now I totally have kind of made my peace with that, and it's sort of I now realize that running the store kind of fulfills something totally different in my practice, and in terms of it allows me to show up for my community in a way that's I wouldn't be able to do with just my art. And that means that's meeting artists, and that's talking about materials, and that's it's a cool way for me to like be involved in the community in Vancouver where I'm making my stuff. So I do now, I see it as like equally fulfilling instead of like one taking away from the other.
What has been one of the most challenging projects you worked on, and why?
Off the top of my head, like Hootsuite comes to mind, which is that big building that I painted in Mount Pleasant. That had its own like challenges just because it was like kind of like the biggest, most surface area that I've done. And I learned little painting tricks from doing that, which aren't really super interesting. I think one of the biggest projects, when I think back, is actually renovating and moving into the new studio that I'm in now. I think that as a personal project was like one of the biggest milestones that, and also one of the most fun. Like my team and I just set out a budget to do this thing, finding the spot, figuring out all the design and the layout, building cabinets, doing, designing how we wanted our studio workflow to look, and how how we wanted the store to look and feel. That was probably the most like greatest learning experience and milestone that I could think of recently. That was also it was very challenging, but it was also very, very fun. I think all in all, I'm kind of like a geek for systems and studio workflow. So this being my third studio, through my first and second, I've sort of learned, you know, how I like to work, and I'm constant. It's sort of like a never ending process in terms of always questioning, you know, is this the best system that works for me? Is this the best workflow that I like? And then taking the time to reinvest and adjust and fine tune those things. Like we're still working on the space today, in terms of renovations and stuff like that. So it never really stops.
When I go into your space, the studio space, and that there is a real emphasis and priority put on the way that things are run, and you can tell.
I think of like Donald Judd as well, because he, similar to Georgia O'Keeffe, you know, he had like a studio live work building in Soho, I think. And, you know, when you look back on photos in art history of some of the greats, and you get a real feel of their life through not only their work, but their spaces.
When you're about to like start a project like that, how do you deal with your stress?
I think it's, I mean, this kind of goes into like, you know, studio maintenance and that kind of thing, is like preparation, I guess, is the best way to kind of manage those things. It's always going to feel like, you know, the daunting to like start something that big or like to make the first marks. It definitely feels that way for me when I'm in the studio and there's like, you know, blank canvases all around, and they're just like pressure, you know, they're kind of like talking to you in a way that's creating like maybe stress, or maybe just like, there's just so much potential that it kind of is overwhelming. So yeah, I think it just comes down to preparation and how and problem solving.
Like, what would you attribute your confidence? Because I think there needs to be a certain type of confidence or feeling like you have something to say, maybe one or both of those things, to begin being an artist. You know, it's like a crazy, it's like most parents would freak out if they heard that their kid wanted to do that, you know, like, oh my God, nobody makes money as an artist. So like, what in you gave you the confidence to do that?
I think it wouldn't be possible if I didn't have role models in my life, or people that were on similar life paths as me, but also like maybe breaking the barrier that was like maybe 2 steps in front of me, and watching them and imitating, or trying to apply some of their principles to my own life.
Like,
you know,
peers,
peers, definitely. In you know, when I was painting a lot more graffiti, there was definitely artists that were doing murals, traveling a lot, painting in other cities and doing that stuff, and you know, without being able to see those people and be like, oh, I want that for myself, I want to see if I can make that work, then you start to align your own life. And yeah, I definitely don't think I had like a robust sense of confidence at that time.
You may not know somebody, but you're like, oh, look at, they're doing it, and it gives you that hope. Yeah,
totally.
Right. So,
and those people don't necessarily have it all figured out either, right?
I really want to break down one of your pieces in detail. Which one would you like to talk about?
The piece is called Admission Tickets number 4. So it was part of like a series of 4. Actually, they're quite small. Actually, they're 20 by 16 smaller panels, and they all kind of have a very similar striped sort of composition to them, with different color blocking sections. And the reason why I want to talk about this piece is because they are sort of studies that I created in the anticipation that I would create a larger series of work down the line, not necessarily reflective of the same style, but they are sort of these paintings that I don't sort of pre-plan in that sense. The idea around admission tickets is that with each mark I was making would allow me to come back in the next day and create a new mark over top. So a lot of layering is happening on these works, and part of my process is about underpainting and being able to take the preciousness away from the surface and being able to explore and be curious with how you're making marks. And the only way to kind of do that is to like not feel so precious with the surface and being able to paint over stuff. So one of the lessons I got in art school really early on was that they had us paint over an existing work the next day or the next time for class, and then you would have to create a new painting on top. And it wasn't a new painting that, you know, it wasn't like you created a figure and then you added shadow the next day. It had to be a gesture that either added, changed, or subtracted from what you're painting. So admission tickets was kind of this idea of like readmittance to the studio the next day to allow myself to explore without the pressures of like creating this beautiful finished product.
How do you know when to walk away?
I guess when you had like covered up at least like 30 to 50%, maybe more of the surface area of the panel, then you can kind of like leave it for the next day. And, you know, you start to like hear a dialogue between yourself and the work, and it starts to talk back to you. So that's kind of when you start to, you know, try a little less to impose yourself onto the work and just let it kind of tell you what to do.
What advice do you have for your younger self about becoming an artist, or what do you wish you really knew when you were younger that has served you well now?
That's a big one, I think.
Yeah.
I think, you know, one thing that I feel like I struggled the most with is sort of like feeling pressure, I guess, to be someone or to be more than who I was. And I think if I were to be able to like talk to my younger self, I would say like, you know, owning yourself is like kind of the coolest thing you could do, or like being yourself, which is something that unfortunately I feel like you only learn it later on, that you become more comfortable with who you are. And I would say that's probably a big one. And also just not feeling like you have to do everything all at once. I feel like painting or being an artist is such a long game. It's not something that you get a career right out of high school and all of a sudden, bam, you know who you are. It's, you know, reminding myself that when I'm, you know, 40, 45, 50, 60, those are going to be, I'm like looking forward to those years of like development and learning. So, yeah, I think, you know, it's very common to feel a lot of pressure to have your, you know, quote unquote style, or like what you want to say as an artist figured out when you are, you know, in your 30s is kind of unrealistic. And to put that pressure on yourself, yeah, it's not necessarily a good thing. Just understanding that it's kind of a long game, and that growth happens slowly, and that's okay.
Yeah. And each step of the way is going to be representative of, you know, a certain moment in your growth as an artist. And each of those moments are important, you know?
Yeah.
We are hoping that you will assign us an art assignment, an art prompt. Do you have something for us?
Yeah, I think I'd love to give the admission tickets challenge.
Oh, yay!
Yeah, which
I didn't.
Yeah, it wasn't. I didn't intend for it to sound like it's own thing, like the admission tickets.
It totally does. I was like, wow, that was beautiful.
I would love to challenge the idea of creating underpaintings, or because that is something that I'm currently trying to explore more, is like creating layer or depth between my composition. So being able to create a new work on top of an existing work would be my challenge, I guess.
Okay, so how do we do that from start to finish?
So I think everyone can start with like a blank panel or canvas of some size, and then whether it's maybe every day there is a new exercise, you create a new composition. It doesn't have to be abstract. It can be figurative, or you could paint whatever you want, basically, on it. And then the next day or the next session, you would create a new painting on top of that existing work.
And then, so did you say you have to take out like 2/3 of it?
I would say 2/3, if not all, of the entire painting.
So you're not even really responding to what's underneath.
You shouldn't be necessarily. You should just be doing something completely different over top. You can respond to it in maybe like small areas, but that's not the goal. The goal is to, is to be able to take away the preciousness that we feel when we have created something, and to be able to cover it up or subtract from that composition in order to make way for something new to take place on that same surface. And what will end up happening when you get to like 4 or 5th is like you'll start to see some of the texture from the existing layers coming through. You might also a blue that you've painted on top of a red might respond to becoming a purple that is now really interesting. So the whole idea is that you're exploring your own curiosity and the own mystery of working with paint as a material, that these sort of like nuances or happy accidents will come out. You just have to like have blind faith and disregard what your the preciousness that you have towards, oh, it looks like I did this yesterday, I did all this work, it looks pretty, et cetera, and just put all that to the wayside to make space for something new or something potentially awesome to come out of chance.
Well, where do we find you online?
You can find me online at www.scottsumi.com. That's my website, and my Instagram is just @ScottSumi. So you can find me there too.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your journey so far with us. And I'm really excited to see where you go. You're a wonderful person to watch.
Oh, awesome. Thank you so much. I'm so grateful that people are watching this. But also, thank you for taking the time to talk with me today. It's been really fun. A great way to start my Sunday. So.